Welcome to the Published Author Podcast, where we help entrepreneurs learn how to write a book and leverage it to grow their business and make an impact. I'm your host, Josh Steimle. Today, our guest is David Hancock. David is a Wall Street Journal and USA Today best-selling author and the founder of Morgan James Publishing. David, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Josh. What a privilege it is to be here. So great to see you, sir.
Thank you so much for coming on. So David, give us your story. Today you're running a publishing house, but where did you grow up? How did you get started? How did you become a writer? And how did you transition from being a writer to a publisher? Give us the journey.
Oh my gosh, it's one of my favorite stories to tell because I think God had a sense of humor with me, but I managed to find a great niche and we're having so much fun and hopefully changing a lot of lives. But I would have never in a million years ever imagined me ending up being a book publisher. And I promise I won't go back to birth, but I had a hard time finding my space. You know, I was a soccer player in high school. I barely passed high school because I was too busy chasing soccer balls and my now wife. And then college, it just wasn't for me. As much as my parents wanted it, I ended up dropping out of college. So I found myself through a couple jobs, growing, up as a early 20s, late teenager, and really had a hard time finding my sweet spot. But I ended up landing in mortgage banking, which is kind of strange. And again, there's a story how I got there. But I landed in mortgage banking and ended up loving it and thriving in it. In fact, I was doing really, really well, even though I was competing with 1,000 people just like me, offering basically the same product and service. Loosely regulated mortgage products, as we all discovered in 2008. And I was successful anyhow, and it was a lot of fun, high stress, but a lot of fun. But as I continued down the years, working in that business, I continued to have to work harder and harder and harder. Not that that's a bad thing, working hard is good, but I kept trying to stay on top. And as I grew in that business, the competition was tougher, and we were spending a fortune in marketing and advertising. And it was just like, I thought to myself, there's got to be an easier way. Not that I'm looking for an easy out, but there had to be a different way to generate business and keep the business coming in instead of just spending so much money in marketing and then all the hard work and hours that I was doing. Now, even though I had an unlimited ad budget and the bank was paying for it, so it really did come out of my pocket, everybody else did as well. So I was like figuring, what could I do, to earn some more money? And so I went down this quest to try to enlighten myself. And I got into book reading really for the first time for me. So I also, went to conferences. I went to sales and marketing conferences, whether they were industry specific or not. I mean, I went to Zig Ziglar, Tom Hopkins, Todd Duncan, Bill Baccarat, you name them from back in the day. This is the mid 90s.
So you started reading a little bit later in life. You weren't a bookworm when you were growing up.
Heavens no. I definitely was not. I read what I had to read and only enough to pass the class. But right. So when it finally became relevant to me is when I decided to make that change. And I studied everything and I bought all their courses and I'm a good implementer. So I came back and I fine-tuned some processes. I hired some assistants. I made a little bit of tweaks in the marketing and I went home a little bit earlier and I maybe made a little bit more money, but nothing really had an impact on me. But I was enjoying, the process. Later I learned that the journey is part of the goal, and I was really enjoying it. And I'm teaching my staff how to do the things that I've been doing to be a success. And it was all working, but nothing really gave me that bolster in my career that I thought that I was looking for or needed or wanted. I don't know what. But it wasn't until I discovered a specific book that ended up changing my life twice. And that book was called Guerrilla Marketing. Now, Guerrilla Marketing by J. Conrad Levinson, phenomenal book, great series of books, and I had never heard of them. It was already, like I said, in its third edition, sold 15 million copies, and I didn't stumble across it. I'd never heard of the term, never heard of Jay Levinson. In fact, I teased today, I don't remember where the book came from. One day I came into work and it was on my desk. I don't know if it was divinely left there, if a friend left it there, or I ordered it and didn't remember it. Who knows? Pretty sure I didn't steal it because I remembered that, but it was on my desk one day. So I read it and it blew me away. I read it and realized that I was a guerrilla and didn't know it. Now, guerrilla marketing is all about doing unconventional things to gain conventional goals, really leveraging your time, your energy, your imagination, and relationships versus the bank account. But like I said, I had an unlimited bank account, but we were spending $100,000 a month and doing the craziest fun things, but all my competitors had the same budget. They all could do the same thing too. But in guerrilla marketing, it was very affirming to realize that I was a success and there was a name for it and there was for a reason. And it was very affirming. So I really started to do a deep dive into guerrilla marketing. If it had a G in it and an M in it, I bought it, I read it, I really tried to implement all those things, but still kept bumping against this, like I'm not quite there yet. So in guerrilla marketing, Jay Leviston actually had like one simple little sentence. And I've got the book right here somewhere, but one simple little sentence that said, hey, if you need help, just email me. And I'm like, I've only seen like 2 authors at this point who offered that. And I reached out to Jay, and sure enough, he responded. I ended up hiring him as a coach, and he was amazing. Now, $10,000 a month later, I still hadn't necessarily learned anything more. No disrespect to Jay or guerrilla marketing. He was telling me the same things that I'd been doing. But his stories were amazing. We ended up becoming fast friends, but he did coach me through, a lot of perfecting, of our guerrilla marketing trade and the banking business. And my income was rising and things were great, but still I didn't feel like I had a magic weapon yet. But he then finally shared something with me that, like I said, changed my life twice. And of course, since I'm paying him $10,000 a month, he's a smart entrepreneur. He dragged it out over a couple of months. He liked to say that he was spoon feeding it to me because I wasn't ready for it yet. So I can appreciate that. So he went on to tell me, he said, David, if you want to charge more and negotiate less, now I'll pause there. Who doesn't want to charge more and negotiate less, right? No matter what.
Right, that's what we all want, right?
Right, no matter what widget you're selling. We all want that. And I'm like, yeah. Well, he said, if you want to charge more and negotiate less, you've got to keep doing what you're doing because it's working. He said, but then you need to add one more thing. And I'm like, this one more thing's coming, but he didn't give it to me right away. So I'm continuing to coach with them, talk to them, and kind of perfecting. And then the next month he says, David, if you wanted to have those clients that you wished you could do business with, and again, I'm sure we all have those clients that just won't turn our phone calls, who don't even acknowledge us in the elevators, And I'm like, yeah, there's these celebrity real estate agents that I wanted to do business with, or these high-profile attorneys who have these big clients with lots of money and CPAs, things like that. I'm like, yeah, they don't return my phone call. He says, if you want those guys and gals to start begging to get on your calendar, you need to keep doing what you're doing because you're having an impact in the community, but you need to add one more thing. And I'm like, Jay, what is this one thing? Twice you've mentioned this, and he still didn't tell me. And then he went on to one last thing that really just didn't make any sense to me. It does now, but he said, David, if you wanted the media to call you when something was going on in the banking business, of course, in banking, especially in the 90s, there was always something going on, I'm like, yeah, I can see that. He said, if you wanted those guys and gals to call you to interview for the newspaper or television or radio, you got to keep doing what you're doing because you're creating a great name for yourself. But I'm like, seriously? He said, but you need to add one more thing. And he finally told me what the one thing was. He said, David, you need to write your own book. And I literally laughed out loud simultaneously while sinking into my seat thinking, who the heck am I to write a book? I thought he was kidding. I thought, that's hilarious. No, seriously, what is it? But he stuck to it. And he was very gracious, very loving. And he helped me realize that, I was a success for a reason. Granted, I was a guerrilla marketer and didn't know it, but I was doing things differently than everybody else in a good way. And he helped me realize that I probably had enough in me to write a book. He was a very good coach. So I ended up writing an outline and ended up writing the book and didn't realize that was a hard thing to do. In fact, it ended up being a stress reliever for me because banking was, especially mortgage banking, was a very high stressful job. Don't realize it until you get home when you finally breathe, everything worked today, And so I ended up writing the book and didn't realize that was a hard thing to do and then ended up getting it published. Didn't realize that was a hard thing to do either. I don't remember how many rejections I may have gotten or how many submissions, but I did follow his guidance and he probably opened some doors for me. I didn't get picked up by Houghton Mifflin, who publishes, the original Guerrilla Marketing, but I got picked up by a New York house. And it was both amazing and horrible at the same time. And this was the beginning of my change. So it was amazing because within 8 months, everything Jay said came true. I literally doubled all my fees and nobody questioned me anymore. And I doubled my income in 8 months, all because of the power of the book. Because, yesterday, in essence, I was a successful hustler doing good. But then after that, I was a recognized authority in the space. I didn't necessarily feel like the authority in the space, but, the book gave me that authority. And sure enough, people that would never give me the time of day were begging to get on my calendar, just as he predicted. And I'm like, I'm swallowing my pride, thinking, oh, you didn't want to talk to me yesterday, but you want to talk to me today? Well, sure, I'll take your money. And then sure.
And now you're thinking that $10,000 a month was worth it for that one bit of advice, huh?
Absolutely. And especially since I didn't have to pay for it because the bank, allowed me to expense that. But that's okay. That's okay. He was definitely worth it. And then sure enough, the media was starting to call me on a regular basis. I literally was interviewed weekly, and it either went into the newspaper or print, or I got on video and talking about what's going on in banking because I was the only local knucklehead who wrote a book on it, And it was all laughable. But the publishing process was not fun. And I didn't know what to expect, but I ended up writing the book, ended up selling them the rights to my book, and they did with it as they pleased and involved me very little. And that's common, especially for first-time authors, but really common for every author. They end up taking over and may or may not include the authors in the space. And Jay said, this is what it is. You've got to work within these parameters. And it was not fun. In fact, my first book, I had such little input. I had no input in the cover, no input in the final title. I didn't even like the book. And when I got my copies in the mail, it had 3 chapters added to it that I didn't write. And I called him up thinking, oh my gosh, there's a mistake. He said, no, we just thought it needed a little extra meat. And I was like devastated. It was good, but it wasn't me. And I had to learn that because, of course, I got asked questions on those chapters and I didn't write it. So that was frustrating. And I never could sell enough books to make him happy. But that really wasn't why I did it. I wanted to, of course, sell books because I had pride, but also wanted to reach out to new clients and whatnot. But it was frustrating. But all the while, my regular day job business was just thriving because of the book. And so I caught the fever for the power of the book, from a really a guerrilla marketing perspective. Even though I was a W-2 employee, it significantly impacted my income. So I started.
And about what year was this?
So that was mid-90s, probably 96, 97-ish, something like that. And then I ended up, being required. They had first rights of refusal on 2 more books. And I'm like, I don't want to do another book because it was a horrible experience. I didn't like them at all. But I had done well enough that they went ahead and wanted me to go ahead and fulfill my obligation to write a second book. So I was able to convince Jay to co-author with me because we had become fast friends. And fortunately, when we co-authored is when he stopped billing me. So that helped a little bit. And by the way, I ended up reducing our ad budget to near zero after the book came out and realizing that I didn't need to spend that money. We were just doing it because everybody else did it before. So it was really awesome because guerrilla marketing was originally designed for people who didn't have any money or didn't have any ad budget. So it was really cool to see that fruition come there because I was able to pay my people more. And of course, I made more money. It was wonderful. But the second book was really what I had wanted the first book to be. It was called Guerrilla Marketing for Mortgage Brokers. And it was phenomenal. Same publisher. And even with Jay on, we had a little bit more input. Now, he went on as lead author because he's got a bigger platform than I did. But even with Jay, we still struggled with a lot of things with the publisher. Now, Jay owned the brand, so he owned the trademark. So guerrilla marketing for this was a no-brainer. But we fought to have the camouflage motif that he had already started to become famous for. And then we fought with a little bit of the content and design and layout. But it was a better relationship, but still cantankerous, if you will. And I ended up selling 40,000 copies of that book to the bank I worked for. So it was good. And then by 1999, when they wanted me to do, my last book was in a second edition of Guerrilla Marketing for Mortgage Brokers, same thing. Even though I had already sold a bunch of books and we were best-selling authors on my book, I still felt like I was never making the publisher happy. They were always trying to get me to figure out ways to sell more books, which, their business I can understand, but it was almost angry, if you will. But by the second edition, it's like, man, this is probably going to be really good. There's internet's coming out really strong, hard. There's lots of new ways to market the book now. And we fought with the publisher over something called the internet. They wouldn't let us use the word internet in the book because they truly felt like the internet wasn't going to last past Y2K, which is, with 99 to 2000. Now, we were all concerned, but none of us really felt like it was going to go away. We just thought we'd have a headache for a few weeks while we fixed things. And it ended up being, in essence, nothing for us, maybe the tech guys, but nothing for us. But we did not win that battle. So the book felt like a failure the moment it came out. It felt irrelevant because now all the things that are working had something involved to do with the internet. And we lost that battle. And it was very, very frustrating. So then I decided I'm going to self-publish a few books, thinking now that I'm a best-selling author, I want to be in control of everything. Not that I'm a control freak, But as I continued to teach my clients to do the same thing, as my business kept growing, I ended up becoming a wholesale banker in that process. So my clients were the old me. They were all across the country. So I was helping them with guerrilla marketing their business and saving money on marketing and advertising and helping them figure out ways to create value. And it was having a blast. But one of the things I pulled out of my, weapons arsenal was that they needed to do a book like Jay taught me. And I was thinking the more that I can help them succeed, the more that I'll succeed, of course. And I had clients that were getting picked up by publishers and their businesses were booming like mine was. And I had clients that were self-publishing, which is absolutely better than doing nothing at all, by the way. And their businesses were growing, but they were having issues on that side. But everybody was having problems in one area or the other. They were either fighting with their publisher or struggling to get picked up or having difficulty getting attention as a self-published author or distribution. But it all worked for them. But I ended up getting really involved in this space with my clients because it was really fun. And when I ended up self-publishing a couple of my books, thinking that was going to solve all my problems, I did like everything. I loved the covers, the titles were mine, the content was mine, but nobody cared the same way that they cared about my traditional books. I had limited distribution. Amazon was certainly in its infancy, but there. So I could sell them out of my garage or on Amazon. And so that wasn't quite the same. But the biggest difference for me is the media wouldn't really entertain conversations with me on my self-publishing books, even though I was just on their show last night on the guerrilla marketing book, but not today on my whatever book, And it was a little frustrating, but it was still, I still think the books are very, very powerful. So come to realize that was common in publishing and my clients, and even the times I spent with Jay, we realized that publishing is kind of broken for the entrepreneurial mindseted person. Again, even though most of my, I was a W-2 employee, I wasn't necessarily an entrepreneur. I didn't have a small business myself, but I realized that they were kind of getting in the way. And I thought to myself and spoke out loud to Jay, I said, Jay, what if somebody created a publishing house that kind of catered towards entrepreneurs where they could add value, credibility, distribution, opportunity like, I had been used to, but stay the heck out of their way, because every time I wanted to speak on the topic, I had to get permission. Every time I wanted to create materials to, one, help market the book or create opportunities for me, I had to get permission. It was just really frustrating. And Jay, which really surprised me, was like, it is what it is. We just have to work within these parameters and make it our own. And I'm like, I felt a little defeated. Well, nobody ever did. So I ended up working with Jay for about a year, probably 2002 to 2003, on what for an outline of what an entrepreneurial publishing house could look like. And of course, sprinkled it really heavy with guerrilla marketing, a lot of Zig Ziglar and some value stuff from Bill Bacharach, and really try to figure out, if there is a way. So I ended up launching that in 2003 while still thriving, as a banker, just kind of did it on the side. And I don't know, man, what happened. It was just the right time, the right opportunity, and the right passion that all of a sudden we started to get, offers to publish books from people that were like me, who were significant in their space. They were frustrated with publishing, and they weren't getting the same level of attention in self-publishing that they had hoped, even though, truth be told, can I reveal back the curtain a little bit, Josh, I had nothing to offer back then. I mean, I didn't have credibility. I didn't have distribution. I didn't have barely any opportunity, but I had a really good idea. And I guess people just trusted me. And sure enough, we ended up getting like a 3-book deal with Jay, with 3 brand new guerrilla marketing books with Jay. So that certainly was impactful. And then we, I'd become friends with other people in the space. Armin Morin was one of our first clients. He's a big internet marketing space. And, I was able to find some people that were, already getting there. And, I didn't quit my day job as a banker until about a year later. Not that I replaced my income, because I was making crazy, stupid money as a banker, but my passion had flipped. I realized that same thing, that I could help other people like me with some secret weapon that I know that Jay taught me, and help them grow their business. And it was very fulfilling. And I ended up, going all in and got really, really blessed. But over the years, we had to figure out, who are we in the space? We ended up earning distribution because we were selling a lot of books, and we earned credibility. And it was a huge journey from there to now, of course. But that was a long way to answer your question, but that's how I got into writing my first book, which worked, and into publishing house, which is, again, never would have imagined to be here. But oh my gosh, Josh, we're having so much fun. And I think our authors are changing lives. It's so good.
Well, thank you so much for telling that story. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. That was fantastic.
Awesome.
So now We're in 2020. Morgan James has been around since 2003, 17 years. Roughly how many books have you published and how many authors have you worked with?
Yeah. So we are selective. Not that we're looking for reasons to say no. We're always looking for reasons to say yes. But in the early days, my wife and I made a commitment that we were going to only publish books that we really wanted to publish, and really wanted to keep them clean, because in the 90s, not unlike today, or in the early 2000s, not unlike today, a lot of people were really pushing the boundaries with profanity in books, and just wasn't me. So we set out with doing just good, clean books, and wasn't sure how it would work, but it ended up working. So early on, we started with one author, then two, then three, then we got to about 90 authors per year by about 2005. And today we publish just under 200 books a year total, about 150 nonfiction books. And then we've got a couple other divisions that we spread out. We got a small faith line where we do about 25 faith books. We have a small clean fiction line, but really when you look at them, they're probably allegorical nonfictions because they teach something. And that's a common theme with us, is all of our books are part of something bigger. The authors are entrepreneurial. The books will teach something, and they're part of a small business or an entrepreneurship, or something beyond the book. That's kind of our sweet spot today. And to date, about 3,000 titles-ish. I haven't counted exactly, but we're doing right at 200 a year now. And most of them are still in print, and most of them are still in our author group, and most of them are still active with us, which is really unusual, because a lot of times in publishing, if you don't really break out in 3 weeks to 6 months, man, you're flushed and there's no relationship. I value and strive on that long-term relationship with the authors, because as long as the book is important to them, it's important to me. And if they're leveraging it, even if sales will do this, I'm a happy camper to keep it, in print and keep working. But we're blessed, almost 18 years into it now. We're selling a lot of books. We've been blessed to be on the New York Times list like 29 times in our short history, over 65 times on the USA Today and Wall Street Journal, heck, 14 times this year. Like 6 weeks ago, we had one on each list. So it's really exciting to see, even in tough times, how well the authors are doing with their books, and what a privilege it is to play in that space with them.
So how do you explain to authors and others how your publishing house differs from other publishing houses out there?
Oh, yes, it's a great question. So I kind of alluded to, some of the things I didn't like about publishing. So when I laid out the outline for Morgan James, I wanted to be very specific. How to get there was the unknown part, and it's funny, I call it entrepreneurial bliss, because if I had known how complicated it was, I don't know if I'd have done it on purpose. But my mission was to establish a publishing house that had credibility, opportunity, distribution, and help with the author. I really intended to. In fact, I did this. I took a contract that I had done with a traditional publisher, and I took a really good self-publishing contract. I gave them to our attorneys, and I said, "Here, make this one." I really set out to blend the best of both worlds. Now, 18 years into it, the industry sees us today as a typical traditional New York house. And that is terrifying, Josh, because that is not what I wanted to be. But I think they see us that way for the right reasons. But our unconventional side, the stuff that differs from a typical publishing house, is why we're so successful and why our authors love us so much and why they're doing so well. So to answer your question, so one of the first things that we don't do is we don't buy or take over their intellectual property. So their baby is their baby. In fact, we even go one step further in that every decision that we make with the author is around the author's goals. So everything from title to subtitle to price, size, format, what should it feel like, when should it come out, all these decisions we're making together, because remember, I said I had no input in mind, and they even added stuff to it. So for us, the authors own the intellectual property, and we make all decisions together. And this is the unconventional side. And then lastly, I'm striving for and seeking a long-term relationship with that author. And over the years, we've learned some really awesome best practices. We want to work with authors that are coachable and willing to do the things that successful authors do. But that also means that we are seeing and teaching and learning. So if we have an author that does some really cool things and it works, well, we want all the other authors to do that. But over the years, we were also seeing, well, things stop working or things don't work. So we want to have a good relationship with the author so that we can help them to avoid wasting time or wasting money. And that just doesn't exist really in publishing today, that feedback. In fact, during our whole masterminding process with the author on their book, once the book is done, our little mastermind team focuses primarily on, the old crud now what? What do we do to gain the attention to get into bookstores? And what do we do to gain the attention of consumers? And how do we leverage the book to grow our day job? Because it's really hard to sell a book, Josh. I don't know if you ever try to sell a book, but nobody wants to buy a book when you say, hey, go buy my book. But they'll buy it by the thousands if you compel them to care. So we spend a lot of time with them. So that's kind of our unconventional side. But they do see us as a typical house, like I said, for the right reasons. As I alluded to earlier, we do have some exclusivity. Not, again, that we're looking for reasons to say no. It's just that fine little niche of us having passionate, enthusiastic authors who have something really, really good to say and say it well, but are caring about the reader and what the reader gets out of it. And then hopefully there's a way to connect the two to grow both lives, so beyond the book piece. But we also have bookstore distribution, which is a very traditional thing and a very good thing. Even though the industry called us the first hybrid publisher to the market, when you look at the official today's definition of a hybrid publisher, it doesn't even mention distribution anywhere. So I think we're even well beyond that, although we have those similar hybrid features where it's a little bit of best of both worlds, but distribution is very important. Most of our books are sold in brick and mortar stores, but today, 100% of our books will show up in stores. Now, the depth and the breadth and how long they stay there depend on lots of factors. Sales, the rep's perception of the author's ability to generate buzz, and how the book may compare or compete with others. We even pay small advances, which is kind of funny because we don't use that advance to try to leverage the buying of their intellectual property. We pay small advances because we learned, like in 2008, if we didn't at least pay a small advance against future royalties, that places like Publishers Weekly wouldn't review our books because we weren't traditional enough. Or the airport bookstores wouldn't let us pitch them or sit at the table until we started paying advances, because I guess we weren't traditional enough for that either. So that's kind of been a funny journey on how we got there. And then, like I said, we've had some successes, but really ultimately, my passion is how can I help them do the things that I did? How can I help them leverage what they've got to be more of who they are, but have deeper relationships with their clients, all through the power of the book.
So if you're not buying the book, how is that agreement structured with the author?
So if you take a magnifying glass and look at our agreement, it really is a printing and distribution agreement in essence. Now, we're considered the publisher because of what we do, but the authors retain ownership. That also means the authors can fire us at any time because they own the intellectual property. So that means we have to earn the right to stay their publisher. But we also don't ask for first right to refusal on future books, because remember I said I didn't want to do book 2 and 3 with that publisher because I was fed up with them. So the way we look at it is we have to earn the right to get that next book. We certainly would want it if it's all going well. But you're right. So it's a little bit different with them owning everything and then us making decisions together. There are some protections in, of course, for both of us. We will want to be the only ones to sell it to bookstores, but they can do anything they want with it on their end as long as they don't sell it to a bookstore. So it's a little bit unique. But you're right, it is different, and the onus is on us to keep them happy, of course. But we've been blessed.
Now, there are some hybrid publishers out there that actually charge the author. They say, you're going to pay us, and we're going to provide services to you, and then we'll publish your book. But yeah, you retain ownership. Obviously, if you're paying advances, you're not also charging them, because that would kind of just even things out. But can you explain the landscape a little bit of hybrid publishers? And because you've already hinted at a few of the differences, but can you explain a little bit more about that landscape and the different types perhaps of hybrid publishers and where you fit into that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. Publishing is interesting. So I can't wait to read the history on publishing as we continue to change it. In fact, one of the things that Fast Company called us, we hit their Fast 50 list one year for Fast Company magazine, for changing the space over the last 10 years, because it's been so much fun. Because before, back in my day, there was only 2 options, traditional or self. And then we kind of came to the market with this really cool blend of the two, hybrid, if you will. And so then there were 3. So now today, there's probably dozens of different ways because everybody's a little bit different. But typically, a hybrid publisher will ask for some sort of involvement from the author. It could be a fee. It could be requiring them to fund everything. So they give them coaching. They help them produce a great product, but the author pays for it, pays for the printing for the bookstore distribution, if there is any, or pays for printing so that they can list it on Amazon themselves or something like that. So there's a spread between the different types of hybrid relationships. And then, of course, there's the self-published side where you're kind of doing it all on your own. Sometimes you may have some help if you use a company. There's dozens of companies, but they're trying to charge you fees to get the things done that you need. The way that we kind of differ in that hybrid space is, as you alluded to, we don't charge any fees for what we do. We really, in essence, are a royalty-based publisher. We make money by selling books to bookstores. And that's a good thing because we make a lot of money by selling books to bookstores. But we don't have any services that we offer, no packages that we sell. And part of that is kind of leaning back to the integrity of us only publishing a limited number of books, each one on purpose. But I'm always open to talk to authors that are starting their path or, growing their platform, because as long as they're coachable, there are so many things that you can do very strategically that other successful authors are doing to grow your platform. So by the time the book shows up in the bookstores, people care. And you'll cross several bridges while you do that. You'll cross the bridge of becoming an authority in the space of your audience, and cross that Seth Godin bridge of earning the right to ask permission to buy your book too. But the way that we work is we do ask three things of our authors. So we don't charge any fees, we don't have any services, any packages like that. But if their book is accepted, we do ask a couple things of them. One of them does have a little entrepreneurial skin in the game, and I think you'll probably appreciate it. And since 99.100% of our authors are entrepreneurs, they'll probably get it. But it's funny how we came up with it, because our authors were doing it anyhow. But what we have to make sure is that with an entrepreneur, because you and I both know that, myself included, entrepreneurs will run off to another shiny object real quick if there's an opportunity. So we try to hold their feet to the fire with our relationship, because by the time we bring a book to market, we may have 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 grand or more into the book, and we're ready to release it. And we can't find the author, we're in trouble. So the three things that we ask of our authors is, one, is since we're not buying or leveraging, that advance to take over their intellectual property. By the way, real quick, just so people wonder, since we pay such a tiny advance, we do pay like a double the royalty of other houses, Entrepreneur Press, Wiley, heck, even Thomas Nelson. We pay about double what they pay. But we do ask, so the first thing that we ask of the authors is, since we're not buying or taking over their IP, we're going to ultimately ask them to bring to us a fully edited manuscript, one that's been proofread by a professional, and they would be proud of it if the world read it with their name on it. Now, Josh, I'm not stupid. We're going to go through it ourselves just to make sure we both look good. But our authors are in control of that content. Now, of course, we prefer clean manuscripts. We don't like profanity in the books. We'll look for things like that, but they're in charge. But we'll certainly hope to add value to the author in the process with making sure that there's key points in the book that make the book very skimmable. We also want to make sure there's ways for the reader to leave the book and go engage with the author, whether it's a free assessment or some upsells or a course or a seminar or something, because that's where the real value is. But they're in charge of that content. And then the second thing that we ask of the authors is, we really just, and I alluded to this before, we really just want them to be coachable. We want them to be willing to do the things that successful authors do. Because you could always hire a better editor, right? You can always delete it and start over with a new ghostwriter, but you can't fix an author that's not willing to get out there, hustle, or not doing it for the right reasons, or is just a plain knucklehead, with all due respect. But we do love working with authors and teaching them, well, this is what you could do, and this is what you should do. And because even today, we still publish most of the guerrilla marketing books. In fact, Jay, like I said, Jay and I became dear friends. He was on our advisory board from the year before we started to the day he died. And I'm still on there. I'm still chairman of their advisory board. And so we're still publishing guerrilla marketing books today. So we love to practice what we preach, is what I'm trying to say. So we work with the authors on the things they should do, the things that they could do, and hopefully offer them a guerrilla budget, and also the things that they shouldn't do because it doesn't work anymore in long term. So we're really seeking for that. So that's the second thing that we ask of them. And then the last thing that we may ask them is, we may ask them to commit to buying a small number of books for their own platform. Now, most of the entrepreneurs are doing it anyhow, because they're doing the free plus shipping funnels, like what you've seen before, where people are really leveraging it, or sending it out to influencers, or selling them at events, or selling off their website. They're going to do it anyhow. And I learned that the average author, our average author, was buying like 2,500 copies of the book in the first 2 years. So I said, hey, let's ask them to keep them focused. Let's ask them to commit to buying up to 2,500 books over the life of the contract. I don't care how long it takes. I don't care if they bought 50 books a year over 50 years. That satisfies that commitment to me. But we don't ask them to pay retail, like Wiley or Entrepreneur Press did or does for some authors. Nor do we ask them to pay wholesale, which every other publisher does. I think I want them to have affordable access to the books in long term. So they pay us like $2 over the print cost. So pretty affordable. And to give an example, like my book, Performance Driven Thinking, it's about 200 pages. It's about $1.71 to print, a high quality trade paperback, but it's about that expensive. So we want them to have affordable access. Now they can buy more if they want to. In fact, the way our model is, the price drops significantly, and they can buy them as many as they want forever at like 30% over print costs. So if it costs $2 to print, their price is $2.60 instead of $10 if it's a $20 book. And that's just my commitment to make sure they have affordable access to the books. There's a lot of things they can do with the book itself, not only profiting from it, but leveraging it. Like I said, we have authors that literally give away 100,000 copies a year of their books, but we're selling 108,000 to bookstores. So they're creating conversation, and these are the things they would like to teach the authors. So those are the three asks that we ask of our authors, if that answers the question.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you have New York Times bestselling authors that you're publishing. So these authors theoretically could get picked up by a McGraw-Hill or a HarperCollins or Penguin or one of these major big publishers. Why would they work with you rather than going and working with the huge publishers? Why does anybody work with the huge publishers?
I know, right? So sometimes it's not. And let me just pause. Some of the publishers out there can be really, really good. In fact, we're all imperfect and we're all good in our own way. So the best path for a particular author may be any one of these spaces, and only they would be able to tell you, why they stick with us. But truth be told, you're absolutely right. So in fact, our first #1 New York Times bestseller was an author's second book with us, a guy named Brendan Burchard. It was The Millionaire Messenger. We hit #1. Great story too, man. Oh my gosh. We hit #1 New York Times like in the second week. And we sold like 60,000 books in that first month. It was like so much fun. But you're right. He ended up getting a huge offer from Free Press, a Simon & Schuster imprint, multiple 8-figure offer. And he contacted me and said, oh my gosh. And I was so proud of him. I was like, dude, take it. There's no reason not to. If they're going to pay you, you just make sure you kind of maintain as much control as you can. But I'm not going to pay you $2 million to do your next book with us. That's just not, we're not there yet. And he did, and he ended up, going on. But he's one of our best referral sources, as you can imagine. Now, he has always hiccups, especially in traditional publishing. So I think he's doing more on his own now. But man, look at his platform; it's wonderful. But we've had like 2 authors who will end up leaving us, and the other one ended up coming back because the grass wasn't greener on the other side. But you just never know. But I'm not trying to downplay traditional because it does work for a lot of authors. But you're right. But most of them end up coming back and doing a second or a third book with us, and I think that's a testament of our at least our goal, to add value and stay out of their way.
So obviously, you're not paying out $2 million advances to your authors. Are there any other reasons that people might want to work with a larger, more established publisher, be it distribution or any other reason? So
distribution used to be an issue, but today, we're actually distributed by the largest distributor in the nation. In fact, the same distributor that some of the bigger houses actually end up using ourselves. So we happen to be one of their 600 plus clients. Now we're ranked in the top 20 of their clients. So that's good, but we literally have the same sales reps that sell into the same bookstore, and we've got a relationship with the same category buyer at Barnes & Noble and the same category buyer at Amazon. So really, the distribution is a level playing field for us now. One thing that we don't do, though, so to give you an example, if you want to see your book 5 copies deep in every Barnes & Noble in the country for 3 weeks, then, well, that's a great Entrepreneur Press or Wiley book. If you want to see that same book for 6 weeks, then you have got to sell like crazy, because if you don't sell at least 2,500 copies, they're going to just move on to the next one. So what we do is, at our house, is that we, compel the bookstore buyers to care, and they'll buy the books based on more of a reality, and we don't pay for placement. We earn the placement, but the distribution is the same. So our copies could be 1 to 3 copies per store, or 0 in some stores if that particular store doesn't sell well with that particular type of book. Whereas like a Wiley or an Entrepreneur and others, may have it in every store 5 copies deep. Doesn't mean they're going to sell, but pretty much it's a level playing field. Or it could just be ego. I mean, sure, I've always been a huge fan of Houghton Mifflin because they're the publishers, original publishers of guerrilla marketing, but they're struggling. In fact, they just announced yesterday that they're selling their trade division. So an interesting world. I don't know if I answered the question, but that's an interesting world. So
that's great.
Yeah, either the advances, it could be the thing, although the advances are really small nowadays compared to longer before. The average advance in America is like less than $500. Strangely, even when you average the multi-millions, that some celebrities get or politicians get, to the hundreds of thousands that some might get, to the zeros that some might get, or close to zeros that some might get. It's just not quite the same. But if you can leverage within the restrictions, why not take it?
Now, what about international distribution, which I know applies to just a small fraction of books, but there might be somebody out there who says, well, I want my book to go international and be translated into other languages. Is that something that you can handle just as well as the big guys?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great question. So I'm a guerrilla marketer at heart. You probably can sense that by now. I think I've mentioned it a couple of times, maybe. But my guerrilla marketing training teaches me that the book should be available in any platform, in any version, in anywhere that anybody might want to buy the book. And I feel the same way, whether it's a widget or a book. I really think that our responsibility is, we've got something good, let's make it available to anybody, any way they can get it. So we do have global distribution, again, through, we're distributed by the nation's largest distributor in North America and the second largest distributor globally. So we do produce the English language book and distribute abroad. So we actually do have sales reps and warehousing and printing in the UK. We've got printing and sales reps in Eastern Europe. We do it in Australia. We also do it in India, all for the English language version. So we've got great coverage. In fact, it's typically, U.S. is our biggest market. Canada and the U.K. often will tie with, second or third, and then everybody else, buys the book. But one of our secret little divisions that, we don't really talk about that a lot, and you don't necessarily see it on our website, except for one little line down at the bottom. We kind of show you our top grossing foreign translated books, but we do have a very aggressive foreign rights division managed by the nation's largest foreign rights agencies. So every book we publish, we pitch to the foreign press, the foreign publishers, and we've got existing relationships with them now. This is probably close to 15 years in the making, maybe 14 years, something like that. But we'll pitch books, and we've got relationships with like Hachette in the UK, where they do the Anglican English versions, or Random House in Germany, or some really strange names that I can't pronounce in the Asian market. But it's a big part. We strive to try to get something for each one of our authors, if relevant, abroad. And generally, if we get that first one, then the second, and the third, and the fourth come pretty easy. And some of our authors have earned well over $250,000 of in further countries than we know, even the States, and it's been fun to watch. But yeah, so again, that's something else that we do really well, just like some of the other houses. Isn't that cool?
Okay. Yeah, this is so interesting too. I feel like we could go on for about 3 more hours asking questions here, but the last thing I want to focus on is flipping it around and talking about what you do versus self-publishing. So one of the other people we interviewed for the podcast, Jeff Butler, he told us a story about how he turned down a publishing deal from Wiley that they chased him for. He didn't go to them. They came to him and said, hey, you're a popular speaker. You're doing 60 events a year. Why don't you publish a book with us, and then you can sell it at the events and we'll be your publisher? And he said, well, if I'm going to do all the selling, why should I be working with you? He had already self-published 2 books. And he said, I know how to write a book. I know how to publish it. I know how to get it edited. I can get it printed. And you're already telling me that I'm going to be doing all the selling of the book. So why don't I just self-publish the book again? Why would I give you 80% of it?
Right.
Now, if you were talking to Jeff, would you have a case to make to say, hey, you really should work with us and here's what we can bring to the table? Or would you say, yeah, if you can already do all that, just go ahead and self-publish it?
So
what would be your pitch to Jeff?
So that is a great question. So it's really about the credibility, which may not be important to Jeff, but having that third-party validation can make a big difference, especially for some of the audience, not all, because not everybody pays. To my chagrin, not everybody cares about the publisher dynamic, but media does. So one aspect of a traditional house or a recognized name is media doesn't have time to vet all the self-published authors. They really leverage, you see more traditionally published authors being interviewed in media, quoted in papers and things like that, because they've already known that there's a publisher that vetted the author and the content, and this is the authority in the space, and this is the right person saying it. And the other is really distribution, really. So granted, yeah, sure, he could sell a whole bunch of books and should. And you're right, no matter how you publish a book today, even from Morgan James, even from Wiley, even from some random house, even from anybody, it will fall on our shoulders as authors to really motivate the masses to buy the book. And that's not hidden at all anymore like it used to be. it does fall on the author's shoulders to move the book. So yeah, why do I need a publisher? So for us, it's about distribution. And again, we've earned it over the years, but I'll give you a great example. When you self-publish, your primary audience is your own audience, which will always be there no matter how you publish a book. And Amazon tends to be the largest, seller of self-published books for many reasons, some obvious. But for publishing, ourself included, Amazon certainly is our largest client. They're typically any publisher's largest client, but they're not our only client. And they represent really a small percentage of our print sales. In fact, before COVID, they were about 26% of our print sales. So immediately that means 74% of our books were sold someplace else that wasn't Amazon, and the bulk of that was brick and mortar bookstores. So theoretically, everything being equal, you say Jeff or John? It was John? Jeff. It was Jeff. Jeff. So all things equal, everything doing the exact same thing, just having 74% more availability of your book could increase your sales by 74%. So you're leaving a big piece of the pie on the table. But also give you an example on ebook. Certainly Kindle's the godfather of ebooks, but they're only 51% of our ebook sales. We distribute to over 1,800 different platforms, including the blockchain, which I don't really fully understand, but that's okay. I don't have to. But Kindle's only 51%. There's a big disparage difference between, the availability of a traditionally published book and the availability of a self-published book. So Jeff may have made the wrong answer, but truth be told, if he's happy, why bother? But he could be happier maybe with a traditional house if you can work within their restrictions, or work with a hybrid, something like what Morgan James offers, where you can have the best of both worlds. And then, of course, the other obvious answers is typically a self-published author can't get the attention of foreign publishers, so you'd leave all that money on the table, things like that. But hopefully that makes sense.
Yep. No, this is great. I'm glad you've been able to come on and answer some of these burning questions that I've had, and I know a lot of our listeners have as well. David, thank you so much for being on the show with us here today. Where can listeners find out more about you and about Morgan James Publishing?
Well, Josh, it's been such a privilege. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm happy to be here, and always a great wealth of information, some useless, some great, but I'm easily discoverable. So you can always go to morganjamespublishing.com. You can find us on Twitter at Morgan James Pub, or me, David Hancock. Grace is really anywhere we're there, but there's the primary spots. Happy to talk to anybody.
Great. Thank you so much, David, for being with us here today.
Absolutely. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to spread the word, please give us a 5-star rating review and tell your friends to subscribe too. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else you listen to podcasts. And if you're an entrepreneur interested in writing and publishing a nonfiction book to grow your business and make an impact, visit publishedauthor.com for show notes for this podcast and other free resources.